We all know many things about this space, even without anybody saying it. We don't need a reference of some knowledge which has come from somewhere else. Intuitively, most of us will know it, and culturally, many of us will know it. In fact, in the field of education, psychology, the world of science as it is evolved, significant amount of studies have gone on this. So people might have gathered knowledge from that. And of course, from culture, from society, a lot of things would have happened in the course of our lives as well. So what is this period where that communication happens through sound, sight, and comprehension? And this period, as I mentioned, extends from or through pregnancy, infancy. Now, what is infancy and what is pregnancy? Pregnancy is the one duration when the baby is inside the womb. Infancy is after the child is born, roughly to the age of 2.5, a maximum of 3 years from the time of birth. So we are covering pregnancy, infancy, and beyond. However, keep your eyes wide open, because this might be a surprise for some people. It could even take in other periods. We'll talk about it at an appropriate time. Now, if all of this is known, with this knowledge, some amount of curiosity also builds up. Agar ye sab kuch hai, so what does this mean? And the moment I begin to understand or probe this in a little more depth, what happens? Some questions come up in mind. And some of the more prominent questions will be, how does a baby get that message? How does messaging happen to a baby? Is it at all possible? Does a baby read? Or is there some other methodology? How does it operate? How does it work? All of these are things which come up. And culturally, again, some of these things which we have operated without formal science being there in our awareness, but still culturally being aware of it. Let me just ask this question. How many of you have been told that reading Mahabharata or Bhagavad Gita in the course of pregnancy is not done? Are there any ladies here who would vouch for that? Or any other culturally oriented people? Okay, there are certain cultures. Okay, there are certain cultures. There are no rights and wrongs in any one of this, but it's a fact of our society. But there is a popular segment of Indian population which believes that you should not recite Mahabharata or some specific portions of it, including the Bhagavad Gita. You should not recite that in the course of pregnancy. And there will be equal number of others who will say that, no, you should do that. It's a good thing to do. So how does this operate? You should do it or you should not do it. Both of them seem to be, seemingly opposite paradigms. Can we integrate both of them? Is there a way we can look at both of them and make sense for each other? Of course we can. Let's see how. So going ahead in this journey, let's examine some of these in a little more perspective. But behind all of this, there is always a presumption, first and foremost. If anything is possible, either in terms of being able to see, being able to hear, being able to understand, comprehend, communication, passing of information, all of that has to happen. The child must be having some abilities. And largely, we're going to be focusing on the duration the child inside the uterus, in utero reality. Dealing with in utero reality, the child, does it have abilities? This is a question which has been there in the minds of a lot of people. And it continues to be there. Notwithstanding the fact that significant amount of progress has happened in different branches of knowledge, but this question will remain. Will the child be able to grasp it? What is the mechanism? What is the ability of the child? Does the ability pre-exist? When does it get formed? All of these are legitimate questions. But what we need to be aware of is that this is a fact accepted in the world of education, psychology, and science today. Let's look at it. Pre and perinatal sciences, PPN sciences. What do PPN sciences tell us? The chart here. Inside the womb, as the baby grows, every day of its life. Every instant, there is a new progression. Starting from the first few weeks, 6 to 8 weeks onwards, the sensorial faculties are under development. And each one of them, in a overlapping kind of a fashion, develop, and right through to the term of pregnancy, this development happens. It's an amazing matrix. You'll see that on your screen. As you will see, the sense of sight, 10 to 26 weeks. Sense of touch, the tactile, touching, that's one of the first things to develop. Within about 6 to 7 weeks, it begins to develop and goes on till the 32nd week of pregnancy. And each of these, at different points of time, these faculties are present with the child, and the child utilizes them. More than just being present, the child also utilizes them. This is fascinating knowledge from the pre and perinatal sciences. So who brought this to the fore? Amongst the people who have done human work, there are many names, but I've chosen this name because this is the gentleman, Dr. David Chamberlain, one of the pillars of pre and perinatal sciences. This paper was submitted by him, and I've taken it from this paper, which he submitted on development of fetal senses. And the assertion which was made, which is now a standard accepted fact, is that the baby inside the womb is sentient. Now, what does sentient mean? First of all, there is awareness. There is an understanding. There's an appeal, be it psychological, be it sensorial, be it emotional. Each of these faculties seem to be there. The baby seems to be grasping it and dealing with these things. All of that put together simply is called sentience. Without getting into technicality, sentience is how the aggregate of senses are going to be engaged with. Okay, so the aggregate of senses, mind, comprehension, emotions, all those faculties put together is what is called as sentience. Sense, sentient. Keep that at the back of your mind. And the baby takes in information and communicates with the world outside. Wow, look at that. How do I know that the baby has taste? If the mother consumes more of chocolate, the consumption of the amniotic fluid whilst inside the womb goes up with the sweetness. The mother consumes pungent stuff, garlic, other stuff, the consumption of the amniotic fluid comes down. So there are parameters by which these measurements are being made. What I'm trying to assure you is this science is tremendously progressed. In fact, so many facets, experiences of people after they're born, events which they have recorded, knowing how people have transacted through their lives very early inside the womb, the responses they've given, including many people of eminence, people who have learned music, being inside the womb, people who have learned different kinds of knowledge, languages, mathematics, so many things while being inside the womb. Now, this is known from pre and perinatal sciences. So the child indeed does have abilities. If the child has abilities, I'm just putting this slide up for information purposes. The evidence is overwhelming actually. But the underpinning stuff is this. If there is more communication and more attachment, more bonding, which takes place between the people who are engaging in that process of caregiving, communication, whatever kind of engagements happen between the baby and the outside, and they're aware, conscious of it, it leads to more bonding, attachment, and therefore better results. This is one. And for those of you who are interested, I'm just giving you references of some papers which are there. If any of you need this, please get in touch with Nutanji. We'll try to facilitate getting these papers across to you. Mother's attitude to baby during pregnancy. It has implications for the child's subsequent development. Mothers whose responses to infants' facial cues, meaning parents who know how to respond to the baby when it's showing a particular inclination of face, certain facial features, the cues which you can read from the face, how that influences the bonds with babies, and bonds means better communication, better development. So the kind of engagement a parent and a child can have will become much better if the parent is enabled or empowered to read the facial cues present in a baby. That shows the abilities. And then the question arises, how early does this begin? We are talking of certain periods, but indeed, how early does this begin? When do you think the baby actually has abilities to transact? And here, please watch this.
A beautiful one. Yes, good girl.
Janet Worker lays 12-hour-old Marissa into a bassinet. She places a pacifier into the newborn's mouth. The pacifier is hooked up to a computer which records the frequency and intensity of the infant's sucking. Dr. Worker and her colleague, Tracy Burns, wanted to know whether only hours after birth, the baby human would prefer her parents' native language to a foreign language she had never heard before. Marissa was born to parents who speak only English. It was the language she heard in the womb. Marissa listens to a tape with two languages, English and Tagalog, a Philippine language. The actual words are filtered out, and the languages can only be distinguished by their cadence. Tagalog is played first. When she hears this language she's never heard before, she gives a very weak response. But when she hears English, her parents' language, she reacts completely differently. The intensity and frequency of her sucking shoots up, and then when the tape switches back to Tagalog, her sucking diminishes. This reveals two amazing facts: that baby humans begin to learn the properties of language in the womb, and at birth, they prefer the rhythms of their native language to those of an unfamiliar one.
Now that's the world of science speaking for you. I hope all of you heard that and you were all able to see it. Please confirm. Yeah, good. Now, if you're able to see it and get the message from there, the message is probably loud and clear. What is it? The baby is comprehending, understanding, responding. Now, all of that as a matter of research, as a matter of objective evidence-led world, which is showing that a baby which is how many hours old? 12 hours old. 12 hours old baby is giving this kind of cognition, response, communication, as also evidence of multiple faculties being simultaneously in operation. So there seems to be something else beyond what we knew till now. Let's look at how this progresses in many dimensions. Let's continue with this narration. Okay, let me just. Okay, now I'm going to play that again. Just watch that.
In fact, from the moment the baby human comes into the world, they are equipped with this exceptional capacity. But new research shows that they know something even more extraordinary. Nelson is less than 24 hours old. During his 9 months in the womb, he heard his parents communicating in English. As in the previous experiment, the pacifier is hooked up to a computer that registers the frequency and intensity of his response. Dr. Rushen Shi's experiment is designed to see if at this early age, the baby human can distinguish between different parts of speech. Nelson listens to a tape which contains 2 lists of words. The first is a list of prepositions and articles, words that have no meaning on their own, like to, in, or it. As Nelson listens, the computer registers his level of response. The second is a list of content words, like nouns and verbs.
Toys. Find
Parts of speech that convey meaning.
toys. Chair. Find chew. Chew.
When Nelson hears the content words, his level of reaction increases dramatically.
Find.
This study has been repeated with babies in many different languages with the same remarkable results.
Chew.
That even at birth,
Find.
the baby human is able to distinguish the words that convey meaning over all other words.
Toys. Chew.
Okay, I know that there'll be some people who don't get what's happening on the screen quickly enough. They're probably of my generation, but I'm going to explain it to you. It's a very simple mechanism. Newborn babies, मतलब अभी भी जो पैदा हुए बच्चे 10 घंटे 12 घंटे के बाद में उनमें कैसे response रहेगी for input signals of language. The first experiment you saw the language of Filipino, which is a foreign language, and second English, which is the native language being played. The moment the native language is played, which is English in this case, the sensations are quickly grasped by the baby and the responses being given by the baby are tremendous. How are you measuring it? The sucking and the intensity, both the frequency and intensity are being measured. It goes up dramatically. So that was one. This second experiment with a different baby, again about the same time birth, what happens? That baby is played sounds which are of 2 types. One are what are called as prepositions or articles, the, and, it. All of those come in the context of prepositions and articles. And another one which is nouns and verbs, which is the stuff which we see and transact with. And the ones which were used there were toy, chew, okay, table, chair, action, moving, all of those are in that category. When you play the sounds which are nouns and verbs, which are action, real life stuff, there is a response from the baby. Compared to non-action words. How does this happen? Isn't that fascinating? Right at that tender few hour age, you can't even call it 1 day old. Within a few hours, you have a stupendous performance being orchestrated by the baby within the few hours of its birth. So even the world of science, the world of education, pre and perinatal education, is vouching for the fact that if this is indeed happening, if the baby is just 10 hours old, is this something which happened in the last 10 hours? Or was this something which happened earlier itself? That becomes a moot question. So the way science, objective science, has been progressing is also phenomenal because it's making available to you this information, this data to tell you that abilities, cognition, and look at it, very intelligent responses, very considered, measured kind of responses coming from a baby. It has talents, it has abilities. Let's see what all this means in the course of our journey. Let's look at that in some more detail. So this begins quite early, as we know, and as we see this, we can see that the baby is cognizing, making sense of languages, responds better to parents' languages. Okay, because using the term mother tongue could be slightly complicated in the context of the present day, where the father, mother could be having different languages, and the father himself could be having multiple languages. His father, that is the grandparents, could be having different languages, and what the child has picked up could be one of those. So given all that, there is this enormous complexity, but whatever language the parents speak seems to be the one which is the dearest and most actionable for the baby. And action words are the ones which are making the baby move. And within hours, the baby is discriminating, knows what is needed by it and how to respond to that. This is superb knowledge for us when we view it from the perspective of science.